So good morning, those who may be in the live audience via YouTube. Okay. Oh. So, excuse the earthquake. So we're going to look at a sutta, one of my favorite suttas. I have a lot of favorite suttas, so it's kind of my catalog of favorite suttas is probably several pages long, but it's a very important sutta. This is Nakulapitā, and this is Nakula's father is his name. How he's named in the sutta. So a lot of times it's somebody's mother or somebody's daughter or somebody's son, or is how they're referred to, and they may have an actual other name. But there's Nakulapitā, Nakulamata, and they're both the parents of Nakula. And this is a joke amongst Pali historians, is like, who's Nakula? Nakula is not found in the suttas anywhere, but they're very devoted disciples of the Buddha. And Nakula's Mata is the wise one in the couple. She doesn't appear in this, but Nakula is always kind of, well, he's learning. He's on the learning curve, which is beautiful. But it's often that Nakula Mata is counseling Nakulapitā. And he goes to the Buddha, and the Buddha says, yes, that's true. So we'll start after that little bit of introduction about Nakulapitā. He's elderly here, and he I had it set up, but now it's disappeared.
That would be
okay. There it is.
You'll have to close and reopen your
Close out of this one.
the upper left corner. There's a dot.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Then do share again.
Okay, we'll have to do it again. There it is.
The disappearing sutta.
Okay, now I think we've shared it. You see it there?
Yes.
Okay, so I will go to the top. So we see Nakula's father, as I had said. And we'll just start reading because what I have to comment about is evident in the reading. At one time, the Buddha was staying in the land of the Bhagas at Crocodile Hill, in the deer park at Besakala Wood. Oh, I didn't introduce us. I'm Aya Sibijana. This is Aya Nyanika, who will be reading Bhante Bodhis, I believe.
I've got Bhante Bodhis.
Okay. Then the householder, Nakula's father, went up to the Buddha, bowed, and sat down to one side and said to the Buddha, Sir, I'm an old man, elderly and senior. I've advanced in years and reached the final stage of life. My body is ailing. I'm constantly unwell. So this is interesting that this is like the first thing that someone would approach the Buddha and say. So it shows the Buddha's compassion that he's able to listen. And people feel free to, or at least in this situation, Nakulapitā felt comfortable to speak about this. Pardon me, go ahead.
Bhikkhu Bodhi's, in this case, I like Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation. It resonates for me. I am old. Venerable Sir. Aged, burdened with years, advanced in life, come to the last stage, afflicted in body, often ill. And then he goes on to say he rarely gets to see the blessed.
Yeah, it's about to come here. I hardly ever get to see, it says the esteemed mendicants, but I think he also says the blessed one.
Yeah.
Ah, yeah, it's there in the Pali. May the Buddha please advise me and instruct me. It will be for my lasting welfare and happiness. So this is interesting how you'd think that he would give him some, what kind of a Dhamma teaching would someone rarely sees the Buddha and he's come and it's such an effort to come because he's old and ailing. It's difficult for him to get there. And then the Buddha says, that's so true, householder. That's so true. For this body is ailing, swaddled in a shell. And this is this word. Weak, fragile, become like an egg. So we talk about frail, elderly in medicine. It's a very fragile health condition. Also, the bones are fragile. Everything's fragile about the body. It's as it ages. Excuse me. If anyone dragging around this body claim to be healthy, even for an hour, what is it but foolishness? So he's affirming the statement that, like he's like, oh, I'm sorry I didn't see you for so long. It's so difficult because I'm old. And the Buddha is saying, so, but this shows also, I think there's probably a warm understanding between them.
Yeah.
And how does Bhante Bodhi?
Let's see. So it is, householder, so it is. This body of yours is afflicted, weighed down, encumbered. If anyone carrying around this body were to claim to be healthy, even for a moment, what is that due to other than foolishness?
So he's just affirming, yes. And I think it's good for us to speak frankly about, I mean, with trusted people, I mean, what's going on physically with us, what's going on mentally, this honesty, just acknowledging, yes, this body is fragile. So you should train like this. Though my body is ailing, my mind will be healthy.
No, though I am unafflicted in body, my mind will be unafflicted. Thus you should train.
That's how you should train. So this is a teaching in brief. And then the householder, Nakula fathers approved and agreed with the Buddha and said what the Buddha said. He got up from his seat and respectfully circled the Buddha, keeping on his right. Then he went up to the Venerable Sāriputta, bowed, and sat down to one side. I'm going to pause there before we get to what happens next. But so there's a teaching and breathe. And then it's like Nakulapitā immediately got at some level because he approved and agreed. And Sāriputta said to him, householder, your faculties are so very clear. Your complexion is bright, pure and bright. Did you hear a Dhamma talk in the Buddha's presence today? So it's this, Nakulapita's elated. He's like, I think we can kind of grasp immediately to a certain extent. Though my body is ailing, my mind will be healthy. And it's Bhante Bodhi translates it as
even though I am afflicted in body, my mind will be unafflicted.
so that's something like you could have that phrase, you can memorize that phrase and remind that to yourself, even though you're not feeling well. I'm cold, or I have a fever, or the body is because of the aging body, there's one thing after another, but we don't have to let our minds be afflicted. So that's like the teaching in brief. That's the pith of it, so so Nakulapitā got to a certain extent, I think. And so
Well, also he's in the presence of the Buddha. I was talking with a bhikkhuni who'd visited a well-respected Ajahn in Thailand, and they sat while he was giving a Dhamma talk in Thai and said they still felt so uplifted and bright, and
right, the present, just being in the present.
Buddha.
Oh, right.
So yeah, I'd be uplifted too.
But Sāriputta,
He's got wisdom.
He's the wise one. Well, of course the Buddha's wise, but he's the foremost in wisdom. And then so Nakulapitā replies, the Sāriputta has asked him, did you hear a Dhamma talk in the Buddha's presence today? And he said, what else, sir, could it possibly be? Just now the Buddha anointed me with the deathless ambrosia of a Dhamma talk. But what kind of ambrosial Dhamma talk has the Buddha anointed you with? So Nakula's father told Sāriputta all that had happened. Is there anything different in Bhante Bodhi?
It's basically the same. Yeah.
Okay. And said, that's the ambrosial Dhamma talk that the Buddha anointed me with. But didn't you feel the need to ask the Buddha the further question? Sir, how do you define someone ailing in body and ailing in mind, and someone ailing in body and healthy in mind?
Yeah. Didn't it occur to you, householder, to question the Buddha further as to how one is afflicted in body and afflicted in mind, and how one is afflicted in body but not afflicted in mind?
So that's sick in body is atura kayo, and sick in mind is atura chitta, or afflicted. The term doesn't, in this brief dictionary, afflicted doesn't appear, but I think afflicted makes a lot of sense when you're talking about the mind.
Yeah.
But you could say an unhealthy mind too. So this is very cute. Sir, we would travel a long way to learn the meaning of this statement in the presence of Venerable Sāriputta. May the Venerable Sāriputta himself please clarify the meaning of this. Is that basically the same there? Oh, you're looking up the word.
I was looking up the word.
There's nothing.
Good. No, it's pretty much the same.
Pretty much the same definition. Sometimes the translators, or either they have like they have so many resources that they
clear up the meaning of the statement. I guess I kind of like that. Yeah, he says it would be good if you would clear up the meaning of the statement.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So, well then, householder, listen and apply your mind well. I will speak. So this kind of sobered him up a little bit, and it's like, pay attention to this aspect of the teaching. Yes, sir, replied Nakula father. Sāriputta said this, And how is a person ailing in body and ailing in mind? It's when an unlearned ordinary person has not seen the noble ones and is neither skilled nor trained in the qualities of a noble one. They've not seen true persons, and they are neither skilled nor trained in the qualities of a true person. So they haven't had the teachings of the Buddha available to them. They regard form as self, self as having form, form in self, or self in form. They're obsessed with the thought, I am form, form is mine. But that form of theirs decays and perishes, which gives rise to sorrow, lamentation, pain, sadness, and distress. So we can all see this pretty clearly, that form is subject to change. It ages, it becomes sick. But then there's these are views of self. Regard form as self. A lot of us say this. I am sick, or I am starting to get wrinkles, or so this is me. My body is me. But then it's a strong identity with the body. But self could be atta, be in, or that the body actually being the atta, being the self, or there's some kind of form in self would be some kind of other immaterial kind of a self inside the physical body.
Is that the second one or the third one?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure. But there's different views of self. Form, self-informed, maybe be that one.
Okay, so
Form
itself, that's the same here. Form, self as having form, and it's self as possessing form.
It's
form in self, form as in self, and self in form.
So there's various self views based on whether it's a material self or some kind of immaterial self, like a soul. And it obviously, if you think it's the body, some people even believe that if the body, or it's at this actual body can somehow rematerialize or something like that. And or that just there's annihilationism. Once the body is gone, the self is gone. So it's some kind of self view tied up with form.
Do you want to go through the four, what they are, or not enough time for that this morning?
I don't think we have enough time to get through all the aggregates.
All right.
But you can kind of get the idea. At the time of the Buddha, there was a lot of different arguments about self, about where it was like a discussion or debates or beliefs about what self was. Whether it was
still
whether it was permanent, impermanent, what it actually constituted. Was it in some kind of a immaterial thing inside the body? Was it? And so then just attachment to the body, if we could just say the body itself, the attachment to the body gives rise to sorrow, lamentation, pain, sadness, and distress. There's alteration, I think that's vipari mati, changes, alters. Yeah.
Change and alter.
Yeah, that's how it's translated in the dictionary here. They regard feeling as self. This is Vedana. And Vedana is pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral felt experience. Feeling. It's usually translated as feeling. It's a common one. Sensation. And so this is the second of the 5 aggregates. He's going through the 5 aggregates here. So how do we identify as with feeling as a self? And it's like what's pleasant to me, what's unpleasant to me, and this a lot of times our identity is wrapped up in all those kind of things. It's uh, what I like and dislike, my taste in food or my taste in music or something. I like this kind of music. A lot of times you hang out with the people that have the same likes and dislikes. All stand together and criticize somebody for liking their taste in clothing or something like that. So they don't like the way the other person dresses. So it's this is kind of very superficial concept of self tied up in Vedana. I'm sure it takes other forms, but this is what's, I think. Can you think of other examples of how Vedana is self, seen as self?
Oh, I mean, you meet people who are just like, why is this happening to me? I am so miserable. I am so miserable. It's the misery is them. Or,
Yeah.
those the opposite, that kind of
Okay. Or yeah. So
really caught in the sense of sorrow often more than physical pain.
or the
Um,
yeah,
it can be a physical pain, but that's more in the body.
or
This is more
identifying as pleasure seeking too.
pleasure seeking is the other side of that for sure.
Yeah.
And
And
you're
then
successful if you have just a constant supply of sensual pleasures in this world, then you're a success.
and then also the bliss realms,
Mm-hmm.
that I am bliss. I am in a blissful state. If can attain some meditative state, and then this is where the atta should go, is into some kind of blissful realm.
Mm-hmm.
And but it says that they're obsessed with the thought, I am feeling is mine, but that feeling of theirs, it says decays and perishes. There's a Vipari Namati. And so I think also what is pleasing to us or changes or the ability to get pleasure out of something. I used to really enjoy my food, but now my digestion is really poor and I can't eat what I used to eat. I try to eat it and it upsets my stomach, or, it's not tasting as good anymore. Or the music that I used to love, it's like, it's just boring now. So this changes and I feel distressed, like, oh, I'm not getting any joy out of life. Oh. So that which gives rise to sorrow, lamentation, pain, sadness, distress. I can't get into that meditative blissful state that I used to anymore or something. Or I fear that I won't get into a blissful state when I pass away. So this is all impermanent. So this is the second aggregate. Do you have anything else to add about that? So they regard perception. This is Sanya. Sanya is the third. And perception has to do with memory. Perception, conception, recognition. Recognition may be a good way to think about Sanya, because we learn as we're from infancy to recognize things. First, we recognize our parents, the sound of their voice, the scent, the mother's scent. The baby knows the mother's scent, sound of their voice, what the face, their face, anyone that they're physically close to. The key in on faces. Actually, this is something visual, any child that has normal vision at birth will be able to key in on and recognize faces. And then they start recognizing the cup, like when they're maybe 2, because they get their juice in the cup, maybe or one and a half or something. They start getting a cup, and they recognize their toy, and they get older, they recognize food comes out of the fridge, something like that. So this recognition, this perception, and what we're perceiving and how we perceive things, and being percipient. I think there's in the different realms of existence, there's a being percipient and being non-percipient. And what are we perceiving? I guess in there's one of the suttas that talks about it, perception perceives, and what does it perceive? And it's perceiving color. Yeah, it perceives blue, it perceives yellow, it perceives. So the ability to perceive things, to recognize things, and they get obsessed with the thought, I am perception, perception is mine. The ability to perceive things, I believe. This is it's a more abstract concept, but in the time of the Buddha, they had much more understanding and discussion about this kind of a thing.
Well,
Do you know about this?
yeah, it's the I am identifying that as that. So, for example, we've had the experience where we look out and one of us will say, well, what color is that? And we actually name the thing different colors, because of the way that our particular sense organs are arranged, and their abilities to perceive. We may actually name something different, so it can be at that level. But then it can also, perception for us, we tend to group things together. When I see that configuration of those things, it is thus.
That's the recognition.
That's the recognition. I recognize that as a litter of kittens.
Right. So to be a litter of kittens may be disaster. This is terrible. My perception is, oh no, there's a litter of kittens.
Yep.
And then you might go, oh, kittens.
Right.
What? Let's adopt them all. And I'm like, no, we can't. This is a disaster.
Right.
So your perception of it is different than mine, of the situation with the kittens.
Oh, it's raining. It's raining.
Right. Yeah. So my perception of, so we have different perceptions of things, whether it's good or bad, whether it's welcome or unwelcome. But being self, as how we perceive things and perceiving things differently.
We get
perception is
arguments about this, like around the COVID virus, or around,
right.
So many of our climate change.
Yeah. So this is my identity around perceptions, but the perception changes. Yes. It decays. There's the viparinama. And so that's how I perceive things. Yeah, they might go into a crisis, because at one point I perceived things one way and now I'm perceiving it differently. So, and my perception, I was tied up in a particular perception as it being me. And now I'm perceiving it differently. And so there's this crisis of identity because my perception is altered.
Nakulapitū is going through this. I was healthy. Now I am ill.
Right. I'm an old man now. Yeah. I was a young man. My identity around being young is gone. Way, way gone. And that is a big crisis for many people.
Yeah.
How they perceive themselves.
Yeah.
I perceived myself as liberal. Now I realize I'm getting more and more conservative. Oh my gosh. like, and what's really true? Yeah, so that's so then it gives rise to sorrow, lamentation, pain, sadness, and distress. They regard choices. Now, this is the word Bhante Sujato Sankara. He defends his choice of this translation. I've heard him publicly. People challenge him because they don't like it. So, Sankara was intention, volitional formation, choice is here, karmic activity. But Bhante or Ajahn Brahmali likes willed activities, but it has having to do with karma or action mentally. It's sometimes it's translated as mental formations. I like volitional formations. For me, there is some idea of choice, but I think sometimes we act and think out of volition. That's something it's like the inertia has this going, and then so it just perpetuates this kind of way of mental activity, which becomes verbal and physical activity. So it's a very complicated word. It's also function. It depends on the context. So in the aggregates, it's more the volitional formations. It's more the choices, karmic activity. It's more this first one, but it can also be on a physical plane as well, or other, or coming together of creating of things and other contexts. So it's like forming. You can form a choice. You can form mental formations, volitional. Your choices are based on a near inertia or volition, volitional patterns, habit patterns, and the perceptions and the Vedana, the sanya, and the Vedana feed into the sankhara. And the sankhara creates, perpetuates the our sense of pleasant and unpleasant and neutral, and our perception of things. So they all kind of feed into one another. And so they're obsessed with the thought, I am choices, choices are mine, but those choices of theirs decay and perish. They change and alter. Do you have anything to say on this?
Yeah, the volitional formations one, I think, is huge, because of the comic resultants. But I think a lot in our times, it goes with like our occupation. You know, I'm a nurse, I'm a mechanic, I'm a scientist, so the me I am, because I have all of the knowledge of a nurse, or I'm a scientist and I wrote such a document, or my book, or I built this company. These comic formations, people end up in crisis when they retire or they lose their business, or because their identity was so tied up with that knowledge base and the actions that they were doing. It's a big one, I think.
Well, that's an interesting way to
It's just a particular example.
Yeah,
a larger set of volitional.
Yeah. So yeah, and then there's sankharas from the culture we come from, and yeah, also generation we're in, and so yeah, our whatever livelihood we had or profession we had definitely has an influence on that. So that's a good way to capture it. So choices and a or volition, will or volition, that changes, which gives rise to sorrow, lamentation, pain and sadness and distress. They regard consciousness as self. Self as having consciousness. Consciousness in self, or self in consciousness. So this is the fifth one. And this is consciousness that arises at all six sense bases. There's eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, body consciousness, which is a touch. So it's at the sense organs and the mind, and it's all interpreted by the mind consciousness. So to kind of merge at the mind, and the world is kind of created that this Salayatana, the six sense bases is considered the all in the Buddhist teaching because it's all that we experience. It's how we put together the world. So this experience of the world, having consciousness that if our consciousness starts getting blurry, like a mental consciousness, or like if my hearing is off, so my perception of sound has changed. So somebody was going to says something to me, and Janneke experiences this a lot, where they say something, and I said, "What? You just said what? This?" It's just entirely different. I can't think. It's often really funny. It's just because you have to fill in the blanks with the sound of whatever the person is saying and the misinterpretation of what's been said. Or yeah, I can't
I calculated that the cows ate what?
right, something like that. Something real.
I just made that one up.
Anyway, so that's one example. Ear consciousness, the acuity is changed. So the awareness I have, like a lot of people start losing their sight, or their tastes change. What used to. So these all five aggregates influence one another. Like I was saying, the way to know is different because my experience at the sense door, my consciousness is changing. Consciousness as self. But most people would think about the mind consciousness, but also your abilities. I mean, it's more at the organ, it's more at the actual physical base. It's changing, but how we're aware of things because of that change. This is my interpretation. I didn't I'm reflecting on it, how could it change? The mental, certainly the mind consciousness. This changes and how we interpret things. But I think that it works both directions. The physical sense organ is changing, and then how we're aware of things is changing, and how the mind consciousness puts the information together is changing, and the acuity of the mind consciousness is changing because as we age, most people can admit, yeah, that the mind isn't as quick as it used to be. It doesn't process information as quickly as it used to be. It used to be able to. So this is great suffering for many people if they are aware of it. Some people just don't even want to be aware of it all. They're just and this is a really dullness and delusion, and but that's still because of the distress they're checking out. It's gotten so difficult, so painful that they're not dealing with it. They're in denial. So they're obsessed with the thought, I am consciousness, consciousness is mine. And that's again, the consciousness, the different levels in meditative states or different realms of existence, consciousness in different realms of existence. This is another aspect of self and what we might identify with. But the fact that this is impermanent, it's subject to change. Even if we were able to attain some, amazing states of consciousness, sometimes that's inaccessible later on once things have changed in our lives. Which gives rise to sorrow, lamentation, pain, sadness, and distress.
I just appreciate you bringing in the 6 consciousnesses. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
And that's how a person is ailing in body and ailing in mind. So we've just got through, but then we've discussed in detail the aggregates, so we don't have to spend as much time. So I want to remind again, is like, obviously when that statement the Buddha had said, one should be although you're maybe ailing in body, you should be healthy in mind, or afflicted in body, you should be unafflicted in mind. How does it, Bhante Bodhi say?
Unafflicted in mind.
Yeah, so mentally unhealthy.
Not afflicted.
So we should not be. So not cha. So this is negating, although. So it's this is what the original statement was in brief, and usually we just think of the body, but he's gone through all 5 aggregates. And this is what we put together as a self. I said the 6 sense, the Salayatana, the 6 sense bases are what we put together as the world, and the khandhas, the 5 aggregates, are what we put together as a self. So it's when a learned noble disciple has seen the noble ones and is skilled and trained in their teaching of the noble ones. They've seen true persons and they're skilled and trained in the teaching of true persons. Would you read how Bhante Bodhi phrases that, please?
Here, householder, the instructed noble disciple who is a seer of the noble ones and is skilled and disciplined in their Dhamma, who is a seer of superior persons and is skilled and disciplined in their Dhamma, does not regard form as self, self as possessing form, form as in self, or self as in form. Seer of the noble ones and skilled and disciplined in their Dhamma. So not just visiting a noble practitioner, but also applying it.
They don't regard form as self, self as having form, or form in self, or self in form. So this is, again, this is various self views, and they're not seeing those self views in regards to the self. And I mean, in regards to form. They're not obsessed with the thought, I am form, form is mine. So when that form of theirs decays and perishes, it doesn't give rise to sorrow, lamentation, pain, sadness, and distress. So when we get ill, not identifying with the body, or as we age, we're not clinging to an idea that we must be healthy. What can I do to prevent aging? What can I do to prevent? We do the best we can to care for our bodies, but we know it's inevitable. This body is aging. Death is inevitable. They don't regard feeling as self as having feeling in self, or self in feeling. So then this identification with pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral sensation is not seen, or I think it's unconscious. It's not really a conscious thing in this society. They're not obsessed with the thought, I am feeling is mine. Oh, if I can't enjoy life, if I can't enjoy sensual pleasures, then what's the point? You know, my identity is so tied up. They don't have that obsession with feeling. So when that feeling of theirs decays and perishes, it doesn't give rise to sorrow, lamentation, pain, sadness, and distress. They don't regard perception as self as having perception in self, or self in perception. Self having perception. So then there's this idea of a self, and it has perception. Now this is making a little more sense of view of self. All these things that we have, that we put together as a self, including perception.
Well, it's like the knowing, if you look at something and it looks like the lines are all wavy because of the color patterning, you don't take that to be the perception that I'm seeing wavy lines, that those lines are actually wavy. I think this one is like, there's an openness. It might be so. I use this one a lot. It might be so.
Yeah, but when I'm thinking about when he's talking about regarding self, this is when looking at self.
Mhm.
And this is my perception. My perception is thus.
Mhm.
And
And
okay,
therefore it's
maybe
right.
it could, yeah, that could go to that. Or I could say, okay, that's how you perceive it, but my perception is this.
Mhm.
I am perceiving this.
Mhm.
And I possess a perception which is thus.
Mhm. Okay, yeah.
And so I think this is starting to sink in a little bit better now that I'm looking at this. They're not obsessed with the thought, I am perception, or that this aggregate of perception is the predominant self. So then that threat, it would be threatening if you said, no, the waves are not, the lines are not wavy.
Right.
Because if I'm so tied up in the
Yeah.
perception,
It's the obsession part of it.
that's the obsession part.
Mhm.
Or it changes, I suddenly start seeing them as wavy. I was so determined that they weren't wavy,
Mhm.
and you were right, and I was wrong, and oh my gosh, my perception is wrong, and I
Mhm.
am wrong.
Yep. So easy.
So then,
They're not,
yeah,
is the one who's gone beyond that and
so they're not threatened by,
not threatened.
yeah, so it doesn't give rise to sorrow. Yeah, it's like, okay, it's now I'm perceiving it differently. I actually see it differently. And so, yeah, so they're not they're not distressing over the fact that the perceptions are changing. They don't regard choices or sankhara or volitional formations, intention, volitional, say intention, choice, karmic activities, all of it. We could say all of that. We don't see any of that as a self. The fact that I can make choices, the fact that there's these volitional forces that I'm I'm a go-getter and I'm gonna do it. And it's, this is my identity is wrapped up in, I get this idea in mind and I'm going for it, something like that. So, and that my identity is wrapped up in then that. It's not anymore. So, it's not, they don't regard choices as self or self having choices. I think this is a big one in our culture, that we have the ability to choose choices in self or self in choices. Yeah, that this identity around the sankharas. They're not obsessed with the thought, I am choice, choices are mind, I am volitional forces, or I am a volitional force, and these volitional forces are mine. It doesn't give rise to sorrow, but when it changes, the ability to make choices, or I used to make all kinds of good choices, and now somehow I'm just making, or my volition, what I'm compelled to do. I'm compelled to do things that isn't uh, isn't turning out right or isn't right. It's like that isn't happening. So I'm not identifying with that. Oh, I made a mistake. That's not me. It doesn't give rise to sorrow, lamentation, pain, sadness, and distress. They don't regard consciousness of self or self having consciousness, or consciousness in self or self in consciousness. They're not obsessed with the thought, I am consciousness. Consciousness is mine. So when all of these things alter, when consciousness decays and perishes, it doesn't give rise to sorrow, lamentation, pain, sadness, and distress. So we don't see that fading of our ability to process all this sensory input. Or if the sensory input is fading because of if we're doing certain kinds of meditation and then we start losing touch with the ear consciousness, eye consciousness, that sensory input starts to go into the background and fading away. We're starting to lose our sense of touch. We don't freak out because our identity isn't so tied up in it. Ajahn Brahm talks about the students coming to him saying, my hands disappeared. I couldn't feel my hands. And he says, oh, great. That's a good sign. But people like it stops them from going into deeper states because they're so attached to the 5 physical senses. So it changes and it's not freaky. It actually might be a good thing, or it could be a sign that just the deterioration of our capacity. But it doesn't give rise to sorrow, lamentation, pain, sadness, and distress. And that's how a person is alien in body and healthy in mind. That's what Venerable Sāriputta said, satisfied. Nakula's father approved of what Sāriputta said. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Would you read the way Bhante Bodhi's translated it?
The ending part?
Yeah.
It is in such a way, householder, that one is afflicted in body, but not afflicted in mind. That is what Venerable Sāriputta said, elated the householder. Nakulapitā delighted in the Venerable Sāriputta's statement.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. I can just picture him
Yes.
with rounds of sadhu and being very excited, happy to hear the teaching.
Mm.
So we'll end with the three bows to the Buddha. Let me see, let me stop the screen share. Araham Sama Sambuddho Bhagava Buddha Bhagavantam Abhivade Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammam Namasami Supatipanno Bhagavato Sangha Sangho Sangham Namami. Thank you all for joining us.